And we're live. Welcome, everybody, to the MongoDB Podcast Live. Today, we've got a special guest. James Mikrut of Payload CMS is going to join us, talk about the space between CMS and application development. There's an interesting space there. So we'll give some time for folks to join us as you come into the stream. Let me know where you're coming from. Where are you in the world? As always, I'm on the east coast of the United States, just near the Atlantic Ocean in a little town called Ocean City, New Jersey. Would love to know where you're joining from and what your experience and knowledge of Payload CMS is. If you've got questions about the CMS space, welcome, Alan. Good to see you from Germany. If you've got questions about the CMS space, about how MongoDB and Payload work together, get those ready. We'll have the opportunity to discuss those. And we're going to bring James in shortly. All right. Wow. Okay, great. So folks are coming in. Moldova, welcome. Great to have you here. All right. A lot of folks from India, Canada. Where in Canada, Yeeson? Where in Canada are you from? Awesome. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so James is the founder and CEO of Payload CMS, and I'm going to bring him into the stream. Welcome, James. It's great to have you on the stream. How are you today?
Happy to be here. I'm great, and you got my dog in the background somewhere. I think he's gonna hang out with us.
Who is this?
Well. That's Blaster. He's a maniac.
I love it. Is Blaster an Australian?
No, he's half Husky, half Pomeranian. Pomsky.
Oh, great. That's awesome. Terrific. Well, James, it's great to have you on the stream. I'm really excited to dive into that space that I talked about between application development and CMS. I think it's so enticing to me. I've done so many different things with blogs and starting from scratch and leveraging other platforms. And tell me a little bit about Payload CMS, and then we'll get into your story.
Yeah, so Payload kind of bridges the gap between a pure application framework and a content management system. And that idea kind of comes from the fact that no matter what you're building, it can be an app, it can be a native app, it can be a subscriptions business, you probably need to have some type of interface to manage your product. And like that content, the product's content, it could be users, it could be orders, it could be shipments, it could be license keys, whatever it is, there's going to be an admin panel that you need to build to manage your app. And then a lot of times, like the word CMS is used to talk about website content specifically. And they like razor sharpen their focus into like paragraphs and headlines and pictures. But in reality, like the interface of a proper built CMS can handle much more than paragraphs and images. It can handle orders. It can handle, like, for example, we used Payload to build the back end of Payload Cloud, and that gives us an interface. So if somebody calls in and asks for help about their project, we can quickly pull it up right in Payload and then like see what's going on for their project for them. And you need to have that type of tooling. So like the gap between application framework and CMS, we're trying to close that by showing that like content is a pillar of the internet, but oftentimes you're going to be restricted by, oh my Lord, is Payload a WordPress plugin? Thank you. You are really gunning for it today. Yes, no, it's not. It's not at all.
It's not.
No, you know, like I've built some pretty crazy things with WordPress before. And like, I think WooCommerce is a good example of like taking a CMS and stretching it out into more of like an application backend. And you know, you shoehorn WordPress for too long into things that it wasn't supposed to do, and then you start to see the cracks real quick.
Yeah.
And
I
got tired of that, so that's why I built Payload. That's what we're all about.
Wow, fantastic. Well, James, what did you do prior to building Payload?
I started my career in Chicago working for a typical tech firm. I had a great time in my 20s. We had a rooftop bar. The company was called Clever Bridge. They were based in Cologne, Germany. Had an office in Chicago. I was a front-end developer there, and then I moved to the branding and the marketing side for a minute. Worked with some very intelligent people and had a great time working in the office, just hanging out with my coworkers, making lasting relationships, kind of bridging the front end, the design gap. And then I started an agency in 2015. So that was I've been an entrepreneur since 2015. I started the first one. It was called Keen. And I still work with a lot of the people that we brought into Keen right now. Half the Payload team is still from like the 2015 era. And it's pretty cool. I know these colleagues of mine quite well. But we were really successful. It was a digital agency. It was building some high-end, anything. It was branding, advertising, but we were also doing full application development. And in that experience, I saw like, okay, it's time to build a SaaS product. What is our tech stack? Are we going to use Laravel? Are we going to pair it with React on the front end? Are we going to bring in Stripe? And then the next project comes along and it's just like a little website with maybe a calculator or something on it. And so we're like, okay, this one's going to be WordPress, but we have to bring in this library over here and reinvent the wheel for every single project that has little tiny differences. And we would never get truly proficient with any tech stack. So I started to kind of like in that agency setting, I started to see the cracks in the engineering industry, and I started to kind of formulate Payload. But I've been in the agency world since then. We just recently shut down the agency to go full time on Payload. The team and I have only been full time on Payload since like July to August of this past year.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So I'm officially out of the agency world and now on Payload full time, and it's time to make it rain.
Yeah. Congratulations. So are you looking for backing? Where are you at in the startup journey?
Well, I was lucky enough to get accepted into YC, Y Combinator, and we went through the summer batch, and that was life-changing. I knew it was going to be life-changing. It was. Yeah. I have a funny story about this. So my co-founders and I, we had our YC interview on Cinco de Mayo last year, and they tell you, stick around for like 4 hours after your interview because we might need to get you back on the phone. We might need to talk to you, like whatever. So we had our interview. Cinco de Mayo, margaritas are calling my name, and like we're delaying. Like, okay, we're not going to the bar. We need to wait. We need to hear from YC. So the nerves were high, and like 9 o'clock came around, and we're like, all right, we're not going to get called back tonight. Let's go drink a margarita. So go to the bar, and then Dalton from YC calls me, and he's like, hey, we want to get you back on the phone. Can you be back in like a half hour? And we're like, oh, okay, everybody go home fast, get ready. And they accepted us. It was great. So YC was our first funding. That happened in May. And then we raised a seed round and we did really, really well. I think Payload was already quite a mature product when we got into YC. And we did very well with our fundraise. We brought in Gradient Ventures, which is Google's AI firm. Mongo Ventures, which that's amazing because we leverage Mongo so much. And a handful of other good venture capital backing just built our seed round. So we're good. We're in great shape.
Oh, that's great. Terrific. So Payload comes to fruition. You've launched it, and it's catching on. I just have to, before we leave the venture space, I mean, CMS, like that's a tough sell. Like, talk about the pitch to YC. Like, how did that come together, and what made Payload stand out, not just as a CMS?
So I have CMS fatigue. This is something that the whole team and I talk about often. Like, I'm almost embarrassed to connect myself to the name CMS because they are everywhere. And they're literally all carbon copies of each other. Like, every single one of them does the same exact thing. And none of them can do that 30% extra that you really need them to do. Like CMS, okay, I log in, I can save a draft, I can publish a draft, like, boom, that's what a CMS does. It's a CRUD API.
Yeah.
But when we pitch Payload, it is much more than a CRUD API. It's so much more than just a CMS. The application framework aspect of it is, I think, what YC resonated with and what our investors resonate with. And also, we just have really good metrics. Like, we've only been open source since May, and we've already got 10,000 stars. We've got 8,000 projects in production. We've got incredible engagement from the community. People are loving it. And I think like the combination of the application framework aspect and our engagement that shows that people actually are responding to what we've built that were
Yeah.
different than every other CMS. I think that's
Mhm.
what people responded to.
Yeah, that's great. When you say application framework, I'm thinking SDK plus the drag and drop features that I typically get from like a low code. Am I thinking right?
Well, I would say we are not low code. We never want
Okay,
to be
yeah.
low code. Like
Okay, good.
we embrace quality code. Like
Mm,
one thing I want to draw a parallel really quickly. Like I want
sure.
to keep the black magic to a minimum. I
Hmm.
don't want someone to have to learn how to use Payload. It should be
Hmm.
TypeScript, it should be React, and it should be Express. And then from there, you should already know it because you already use those technologies. Like
Yeah.
if you have to sit and learn how to use Payload, I'm doing my job wrong. And I
Mm,
think like Next.js has done a really good job of this. Like their
hmm.
surface area is so small, but they run so deep with their potential like applications. And that's what I want Payload to do. So like we are definitely code first. We're never going to
Yeah.
be low code.
Yeah.
I refer to low code CMSs like click ops. Like as an engineer that actually knows what he's doing, I do not want to click around in an interface. Like, give me a first name field. This field is required. Give me a last name field. This
Yeah.
field is required. Like, I just want to write it like a schema. Like, I want to write a
Yeah.
schema. I want to version control it, store it in GitHub, and then be able to sync changes from my environments and everything. So we are 100% different than that.
Yeah. So interesting. I can't wait to dive in. Click ops. I love that. That's it. I don't think code first when I think CMS. So it is really a compelling. So I'd love to maybe depart from the audio only space that we're in at the moment, or the visual, or the audio only, into a space where we're actually showing
Mhm.
what Payload looks like. Do you want to give the audience a peek at Payload?
Absolutely, I do. Let's do it.
Yeah.
See if I can figure this out at least. All right.
Putting you on the spot.
Share. No, I'll be able to figure it out. Entire screen. Bam. All right. Got it?
There we go.
All right. So
Let me get
this
that
is
link off the
Payload.
screen.
What'd you say?
Let me get that link off the screen. There we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is Payload, and this is the CMS for our actual website. So if I go back to pages here and I can search for the home page, go to this page, and I can show you the front end. So this is Payload. And the CMS is really nice and sleek and minimal. It's meant to be extended. It's not meant to push our color palette on you or anything like that. Like you should be able to extend and build on top of anything about Payload. And so this is the home page. This is how it works. And you can see here, this is like the hero tab. And then I can go over to content and you can see every one of these layout building blocks is powering the content of the homepage. So app framework versus CMS, that's kind of this section right here. And then we have the steps, how it works. So there's step 1, step 2,
Okay.
step 3.
Oh, very cool.
And so it's like a layout block builder, and I can add more layouts in here from the ones that I've got configured. And
Yeah.
it's all really flexible, but yeah.
Yeah. So it could be very simply a kind of a drag and drop, almost like a WordPress replacement, just on the surface. Build if you wanted to very simply build a blog.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can
Yeah.
still do that, but the part, like the thing is, that part isn't hard. Like
Yeah.
the hard part runs 6 levels deeper, where like, and let's talk about the application framework idea again for a second. Like the things that separate us from just a straightforward CMS are that you can reuse Payload's authentication. We give you auth and we give you access control on a document by document basis, but also on a field basis. So you can build incredible role-based access control models. It's all functional. So you can build like very, very robust access control patterns. And we have something called the local API, which is basically an ORM like Prisma, but it's all heavily typed in TypeScript, and you can leverage it to build like data intensive applications with Mongo on the back end. And I find that Mongo is a really good fit for Payload and the types of data that we store, because let's take a look at like, okay, here's the interface for Payload. And each one of these has its own data, like kind of nested into nested data structures. And in the JSON world, it's pretty nested. It's pretty deep. This is not a table. This is not like, okay, I have these 6 fields on this table and call it a day. Like, look how deep this goes. Like we're in a hero block right here.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the rich text field. We have sidebar content. Here's the layout. So we have pricing. We have content grid. There's all this nested data. And when we retrieve this from the database,
Mm-hmm.
we retrieve one document and we get all of this content back. And I know that other databases have the JSON field and the equivalent, but at that point, you're not using a relational database for what it's meant to be used for. You're just replicating in like a NoSQL database, but inside of SQL. So it's always like, I always kind of defend our choice here because we get some crazy performance benefits out of using a document-based database like this. You just jam everything on there. It's a document. You can put any type of data shape you want right there, and you can index the fields. You can make it. You can still use relations, and it's a pretty good pattern for us.
Yeah, yeah. I contrasting this with WordPress, I don't know how many times I've run up against that whole plugin pattern and the tabular structures behind that, and trying to like write a custom application that leverages data that's whittled throughout that table structure in WordPress. It's just mind-boggling and baffling.
Yeah, I can comment on that real quick. Whenever you use advanced custom fields in WordPress,
Mm-hmm,
you are literally using a key value pair for every single one of your fields. Like you have two tables. You have WP posts, and that has like your page title and your page content. And then you have WP post meta, and that's literally a key value store. So every single one of your fields has to be joined in onto that parent document every time you read anything. Like the table structures are not designed for this type of work in WordPress. Like you're basically forcing it into submission. And whereas Payload is literally purpose built for this. So the structure of the database literally reflects one-to-one with the type of the data that you get out of the REST API.
Yeah. So we have someone asking a question around payload stored in local storage. Is it the same for the cloud? So I guess we haven't really talked about what I'm looking at now is Payload CMS, and that's open source. I can download that, install, and run it locally.
Yep.
And then I imagine I can do something in the cloud. Do you want to talk about the Payload Cloud?
Yeah. Payload is always going to be completely free. We don't charge for anything. You can download it. You can install it locally by running npx create payload app, and you never have to pay us a dime. You have to put it somewhere to get it on the internet, though. So generally, you're going to go to AWS, or you're going to go to DigitalOcean, or you're going to go to any number of cloud hosting providers, and you're going to pay them. But the only reason that you would ever pay us is if you wanted to leverage Payload Cloud. So there are lots of good like cloud hosting vendors nowadays. Like for example, I always would just go to Vercel for compute, right?
Yeah.
And that's great for a Next.js website and similar. But with a CMS, you have more than just the compute to worry about. A CMS needs the compute, it needs a database, it needs file storage for your uploads, it needs an email vendor for like the transactional emails that are generated, like forgot password and whatever you decide to do. And so you have to have all these services, and that's not even all. Then you have to have a CDN, then you have to have automatic deployments and like a high level of security to connect all of it. And you can go wire that up yourself, but Payload Cloud just gives all of that to you out of the box, and it makes it way easier. It's like, if you go to our Discord channel, I think like 75 to 80% of the questions we get are about deploying Payload to production servers. And Payload Cloud, the only reason you would want to pay us is to let us make that easier for you. So there's the difference. Payload is free. We charge to deploy it if you want, but you don't need to pay us for that.
Yeah. I love that. I love the always free model. MongoDB supports the same thing. MongoDB is an open database. You can download it, run it anywhere you want, or you can pay us to run it for you. You can even run it free in the cloud using an M0 sized instance for MongoDB. But so I was thinking about the difference between Next.js and Payload, right? Because I look at it this way: like I've been a developer all of my professional career, and literally I could make a CMS out of Bash, right? From command line. So Next.js is an application framework. It's at the very basic level. It is opinionated in that it's got an architecture and it enforces those kind of the page structure on you. Tell me about the difference between the low level of Next.js and a Vercel and Payload?
Yeah, so right away, Next.js is not going to give you the admin UI out of the box.
Mm-hmm.
So you would have to build all of this yourself. All these complex field types, like, for example, I was showing the layout builder. Like, this is a very complex field type. You can have nested layout builders, like I'm showing here. You can have arrays. You can have a rich text field that has custom components, like a YouTube video even. There's
Oh, cool.
crazy complexity in delivering this type of editor to your users, like little media upload components. You would have to build all of that from scratch if you wanted to replicate what Payload can do with Next.js. So Payload gives you significant functionality out of the box. And it also gives you every endpoint with security and with access control and with an extensible hooks pattern. There's just so much more that Payload can get you going with, but it can complement Next.js, because on the front end, we don't know what your front end UI needs to do. Like, that needs to be tailored to your experience. That's the place to focus your energy as an engineer. Focus on your app, focus on the front end, but don't recreate the wheel on the back end.
Yeah. So tell me how, let's say I've got a Next.js app. I'm actually working on one now, and I want to incorporate CMS-like functionality. I'm looking at Payload. How would these two worlds come together?
I actually might have like a code sample of that somewhere. Let's see. We just released a big package that allows you to combine Next and Payload into a single serverless boilerplate.
Oh, wow.
And it's super cool how you can leverage Payload's local API to retrieve content directly inside of your server components in Next.js. So for example, here we go. Here's a server component in Next.js. And to get your page, you just run payload.find. And this is like the ORM application framework side of things. Like, this is fully typed as well. This is all extremely robustly typed in TypeScript. And you don't have to do a thing. Then you just pass these props into your React components. Good. So this is like a symbiotic relationship. Like, we take care of the data layer. We take care of the admin panel. You build your front end. You do what you need on the front end.
I love it. And I love that it's strongly typed, opinionated. Tell me about the data structures in pages. You mentioned polymorphism. You're supporting a flexible set of fields that you can have in your CMS. How do you deal with the unpredictability of polymorphism?
So the schema is completely up to you to design. Like, for example, if I show you this schema for these pages here, it is designed in order to support this website. So I have a title, I have a tabs field with hero, kind of like what I showed before. Then I have the content tab, and then I have a layout field with blocks, and it has a call to action, content, media, etc. But this is defined by you as the engineer. So you craft your shape of your data, and it can be tailored to whatever you need it to look like. This is like how you start a Payload project, is you design your schema. And you can make use of the 23 field types I think we offer. So there's like the obvious ones: checkbox, radio, select field, text area, rich text, whatever. But then you also have the relationship fields that are more powerful. The relationship field is replicating the relational aspect of a SQL-based database, where you can tie, like, let's say this page has this category or something, right? And you need to tie those things together. That's the relationship field, and it's actually super powerful. And one of the things that I get asked a lot is like, hey, does Payload suffer from the relational perspective because it's not a relational database? Like, and that's a valid concern. A lot of people think that NoSQL can't do relationships, or it shouldn't do relationships. But I actually did a test. I think this was over the summer. We did a performance test, and we stacked up. We intentionally designed a heavy relational schema. Like, basically, this test that we ran was 100% relational based. Like, you load one document, and then you have to go out and join 60 other documents. Like, just heavy relational stuff. And we stacked it up against Postgres. So we're on Mongo, heavy relational tests. We stacked it up against Directus and Strapi that were on Postgres. And we hammered the API. We hammered the API of all three of them, identical schemas. One's on Mongo, and the other two are on Postgres. And the results speak for themselves. It's Payload, the average response time was 15 milliseconds, and the total duration was 1,500 milliseconds. Directus came in second. They had 45 milliseconds. Remember, this is relational. This is where the Postgres database should shine, but we are outperforming it with MongoDB, even though it's a relational test. And then Strapi came in a distant third. They were almost 7 times slower than Payload. And that's just very startling to me. That's striking. That shows that like you kind of have to not read in too much to what you see on Reddit, and you have to like test things yourself. And you have to, the devil is in the details. In this case, I think the devil in the details is the data loader pattern that we leverage. I don't know if anyone has ever heard of data loader before, but this is how Payload gets its performance. Data loader is a it's a solution to a classic problem in any database schema, especially in the GraphQL world, where it's called the N+1 problem. And what that means is you have to load one document, and you have to have that document loaded before you know what the other documents are to load. So there's always that layer of complexity, like load the first one and then load the other ones and then load their ones. And it's like a staged thing. But the data loader pattern allows you to batch everything that goes to any given table so that it all happens in parallel with each other. And Payload has this at its core of like how we populate nested relationships and everything. And that's what gives us the flexibility and the power and the efficiency.
Is it like a near-term B tree, like almost like a dynamic indexing, or like a cache?
No, it doesn't cache anything, actually. It just batches together. So like if you get one document, and then from that document, you need to get like 16 different media references, then it just batches all those media references into one query, and then it gets those all with one more query. Rather than doing 16 other queries, it just batches them together for one other query. So it's just the application logic. This was made by Facebook as kind of like complement to GraphQL. But it's if you don't know about it, you should look it up for your own applications. But this plus Payload plus Mongo means that we can outshine any SQL-based database easily.
Yeah, I love that, and I love the benchmarks. So I'm going to ask for those links, and I'll include those in the show notes. If you're listening, if you're watching, you want to dig into this detail a little bit further. We have a question from Gilson Gilbert. Is there any limit to the community open source version? Any kind of hard and fast limits to the number of users or documents or anything like that with Payload?
Zero. Absolutely nothing. We don't care what you do. We don't care how you use it. Go knock yourself out. It's an MIT license. There's no hybrid license. Some things that you need to look out for when you're kind of evaluating open source software is if there's a hybrid license where some directories are kind of restricted, but they say they're open source, but then they have these magic directories that you can't touch unless you have an enterprise agreement or something. Payload is just flat MIT across the board. There's no restrictions. We don't do anything with how many seats you have or nothing like that at all. So just go run wild.
Yeah. I love that. What about concerns over one of the big cloud providers just kind of slurping up Payload and offering it as a service on their own?
Should I stop sharing at this point? I think.
Yeah, sure. There you go.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Yeah, that would be considered like a hostile takeover, right? That's a common problem in the open source world, and I think if someone did that to us, they're going to get a lot of bad press, and they're going to have a bad day. That's just not like in today's society, that's not an ethical thing to do. And if that did happen, that means that we weren't deserving of running this product in the first place. My team, if someone says we need to see these features and you're not accepting our PRs and like whatever, then I say, go for it. Let them run, like have it. That means we're not capable of supporting it, but I firmly like trust in our team. So yeah, I'm not worried.
I love that, James. That's a great stance. And I think that's commendable. So so Nate, thank you for, Nate is moderating on all the channels, and he's given us a link to the blog performance benchmarks. If you're interested in those, and you're listening, if you're listening on the audio only, check the show notes and you can click that. If you're watching, you can go ahead and click through to payloadcms.com/blog/performance-benchmarks to get a hold of those. Thanks for sharing those, James. So what else do people need to know about Payload?
Well, this is just the beginning.
Mm.
We've got a pretty heavy roadmap coming out over the next couple quarters, and
Hmm.
we're going to be looking at things like swapping out Webpack to a more modern
Ooh,
bundler for the front end. So
like
we
Snowpack, for example, or
it'll probably be TurboPack
okay.
or Vite, but I don't know yet. I think I tested both of those, and frankly, I want them to become more mature before I implement either.
Hmm.
Although we're going to be on an adapter-based pattern, so you can choose your bundler. And if you're
Oh,
more
cool.
comfortable with Vite, go for it. If you want to use TurboPack, that's kind of where my heart I think will be. Then
Hmm.
we will allow you to use either one. And that type of model is going to be baked into the payload DNA. I'm
Hmm.
really excited about it. But one thing, like more than any feature, I think and this is kind of something that's dawned on me in the last month or so. Like, there's an inherent kind of flawed mentality about, hey, if you're going to use open source software, then it's like community driven, and you need to like make some concessions about like the rough edges that you might come into contact with. And
Mm.
that's part of open source software. But I think that's completely wrong. And I want it to be my personal vendetta to like make sure that Payload is the next Red Hat of like CMSs. Because you don't expect rough edges like out of Linux. Linux
Yeah.
is open source, but you don't expect rough edges from that. And you
Yeah.
shouldn't from your CMS either. So like the name of our game over the next 6 months is going to be we want to become enterprise trusted. We want to be able to scale. We want to be depended on. We want to be
Mm.
the next Red Hat, but in the CMS space. Open source is going to augment our strength rather than like
Yeah.
be an unfortunate side effect. So we're moving to a true semantic versioning model where
Hmm.
if there's a breaking change, there will be a major version bump. And I've been hesitant towards that right now just because like we want our major version releases to be splashy and marketing, but like screw that. That's out. We're just going to be legitimate trust. Like if
Hmm.
there's something that you don't expect, it will be a breaking change and you will see a
Yeah.
major version bump according to it. So lots more in that term, like lots more to come, but I'm really excited right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what version are we at today?
1.0,
1.0. Wow.
1.6 point something, I think.
Okay. Wow. And you mentioned 10,000 stars. How
Mhm.
has the community been in terms of forking and offering PRs? Is it is there a
Oh,
lot of activity?
a lot, a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need as a team. My team needs to go through and review and merge a lot of PRs right now.
Hmm.
I'd like to say thank you for your patience, everyone that has an open PR. We're gonna get to that probably later this week or next week, especially. But yeah, I am so like proud of everyone that's contributing to Payload. Like it's very truly like features are coming in from everywhere, ideas are coming in from everywhere. The quality of life improvements that you only notice if you've been in Payload for super long, like people are
Hmm.
like offering these up on like a platter to us, and it's really really nice to see.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the sign of a really healthy open source project. I mean, obviously, it's difficult to manage a very active community project because you've got so much activity and you have to have somebody dedicated to reviewing PRs. But at the same time, you get the real goodness of not only uh, free work on your code base, but ideas, good ideas from the community. These are people that are so invested in the product that they're using it and they want to see those changes enough that they're willing to dedicate time to it. So that's
Absolutely.
yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So James, you're a bit of a unicorn. I love the way you think. I like your approach to launching and building payload. Tell me how you bridge the gap between someone who's running a business as a founder and you are the CEO, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And you're very I mean, you're in the weeds, you're in the code base. You're looking at code. You're able to demo the products. That's a rare thing for founders and CEOs today, I think. How do you manage that on a daily basis? Are you still hitting the keyboard regularly?
Oh yeah, lots.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
Number one, I love it. Like
Yeah.
that's I truly like if I'm going to a movie, if I go see John Wick 4, my life is on pause. Like I don't want to be looking. I don't want to watch John Wick 4. Like don't invite me to do that because I just want to go home and write code. Like
Yeah.
number one, I just have a true fascination with like what I do for work. And
Mhm.
that makes it easy. That means like when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, oh man, I just had a really good idea last night on how to make this adapter pattern. It's clean, it's organized, it's like a mental exercise, and it feels so good when you design something that actually like
Mm.
it's bulletproof. Like it's just like it makes me proud to work on stuff like that. And so like I like it, but also it is hard. Starting a new company and trying to be aggressive about growth and doing the right things and making everyone happy. Like
Mm.
there's a lot of stress that comes along with that. And I mean, I thought my life would get easier when I left the agency world because like agency world, you put your brain in a jar for everyone else and for their projects.
Yeah.
But I always wanted to just do that for my own project instead. And like that's great. I thought my life would get easier with a little bit of concentration, but with Payload, like, and how quickly it's horizontally expanding, it's the same, if not more stressful.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's not easy.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you willing to share a little bit about your day? Like, what does a normal day look like for James?
Yeah. So we start our day with a full team stand up every morning.
Mhm.
And we use Notion for tracking who's working on
Love
what. We do
Notion.
sprints,
Yeah.
and everything is very collaborative for Payload. Like I mentioned earlier, I'd say over half of our staff I've been working with since like 2016. Hey, Will, thank you. Will is a mainstay in our community. He's been around for a minute. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's great.
Yeah, it's stand up every morning, collaborative.
Mhm.
Everybody on the team is just dynamos. Like they
Mhm.
all fire on every cylinder at all times, and they snap things up. They come up with ideas and they work on them in parallel.
Mm.
And so after stand up, everybody has kind of a good idea of what they're working on, and then we kind of split. And I run parallel a lot of the times. So if it's something about marketing or if it's something about a UX feature or something, then I'm going to go snipe certain aspects of what I need to help with. But
Mhm.
it's very rare that I have hours of free time during the day. So I usually like if I'm going to write code, it's going to be on the weekend or it's going to be after hours.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, usually I'm just kind of jumping around, doing a lot of different stuff like this.
Yeah. 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 So this kind of falls outside the writing code aspect, but I imagine as a CEO, you've got a lot of other moles to whack that don't involve writing code. How do you feel about that? And do you ever see yourself maybe moving into the role of a CTO and bringing somebody else in to run the? No.
No, I've only got a good 5 years left in me writing code, and then
Okay.
I'm done. Like maybe
Okay.
less than that.
Yeah.
My team is like quickly outshining me at this point, so I'll just let them do
I
it.
love
Like
that. I love that.
I like the business side.
Mhm.
I think that I have a good vision, and I want to like leverage myself for what I think is most important for the company, and that's going
Mhm.
to change from writing endpoints and features into more like let's position ourselves this way and let's like establish this partnership and let's build this future product idea. Like so I'm firmly in the CEO like avenue from here on out. um
Great.
that's the way it is.
Yeah, yeah. So I want you to put your future seeing hat on. Tell me about the future of, well, let's start with with Payload, and then maybe application frameworks in general.
Well, the future of Payload, like I think I mentioned this earlier, but I want to be the red hat of CMSs.
Hmm.
Like I want to be trusted from an enterprise perspective.
Yeah.
We already have some like Fortune like 10 companies using Payload. I can't name them right now, but there's some significant names that are building with Payload. And I want them to never look back from that. Like
Hmm.
this is a set of software that should be able to be used by a hobbyist, but then should also be able to be used to power critical content infrastructure for like absolutely critical projects.
Mm.
That's my future for Payload right there. It's going to be way more than just like a little tool that's cool on GitHub for a couple of years. No, this is like a solution to the content pillar of the internet. You've got payments,
Mm.
you've got content, you've got infrastructure. That's like what the internet is. And Stripe is doing a great job with payments. I want to replicate that with content. That's my goal. What was the second part of your question?
So application frameworks, like the space that Payload CMS is in, what do you see for the future there? What's the dynamic for the future?
I think that There's been a missing ingredient from the application framework world for so long, and that is UI. That is the front end. Like if you design a content model, shouldn't you have a UI to edit that content model that's like robust enough to do very advanced like things? That's what Payload fills. And I expect that there will be more of this coming from other application frameworks in the future. And I think that it seems easy at the surface level to do a good job. It's just a CRUD interface. Everybody can do that. But
Yeah.
then you get into the details and you get into things like conditional logic where you show and hide a field based on what another field does, and like where access control is respected in your front end. So like if you don't have access to these 3 fields, they're read only automatically and you can't change them. Like localization, being able to toggle different languages and see the values of your different languages next to each other. Like there's so much in the minutia of properly building a UX that can match the strength of your application framework backend that I have a massive head start on everybody. And like I can tell you from experience, I have poured blood, sweat, and tears into that. And there's a couple aspects of it that are extremely difficult to do performant and like thoroughly. So I think we've got a head start.
Yeah, yeah. So, what are your thoughts on how AI is changing the application development space, and will it impact Payload, and how?
I think that AI will function the same way as Stack Overflow has functioned for a long time for me. I already use it once in a while. I'll go and ask it a question. 99% of the time, it is a dangerous answer that could be completely wrong. Not gonna lie. I'm not afraid of it at all. Like I think it's inevitable that it will get there. I think we're ways away from that. I don't think it's going to replace anyone's job. I think that you're still going to be the brains behind the operation, and you're just going to be able to Google things faster. And that's not where the value of your job came from in the first place. You don't get paid because you know how to search Stack Overflow. You get paid because you can think of the ideas on how to connect the ideas. Like there's a difference there. I'm not worried about it at all. But for how AI will fit into Payload, we're actively exploring a couple things. Alessio from our community has built a chat GPT, a couple things with chat GPT actually, like writing prompts and metadata auto completion based on the content of your post. So like there's a couple things where we can build that into Payload as like a writing assistant or similar. I'll tell you what though, like that's all cool, but I don't want to live in a world where blog posts are regurgitated AI generated things. Like I hope there's some way that I can filter out what was written by a computer and what was an actual original thought in the future. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, yeah. Now you mentioned you're a Notion user. I happen to be one as well. Have you taken a look at the way they've integrated AI into their product?
No,
Yeah.
I'm pretty salty, honestly. I try to stay out of Notion as much as I can, and I try to stay out of HubSpot as much as I can as well. Like they're useful, but thank you, Albino. Thank you. I don't know what exactly was well put, but I feel strongly about all of that. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, opinions are good. I love that. Yeah.
yeah,
Awesome.
I got a lot of them.
That's great. All right. So we talked about the future. That was really where I wanted to take the conversation and give you an opportunity to talk about like big plans for Payload. I think you've covered that. Is there anything else you think the users or the viewers might want to hear about Payload?
Yeah, I would just revisit Payload Cloud really quickly. Like,
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of confusion about like, hey, is Payload free or is it paid? Like, I know that we're going to probably try to refine some of the messaging on that page to alleviate that. But I was also talking to someone that was interested in Payload Cloud the other day, and they didn't know that like the way Payload Cloud works is it just gives you your own infrastructure. So like that's different from any other SaaS app. Like if you go use Sanity or something, another headless CMS, you never get to see your database. You never get the connection string. You never get to export your own data. The only way to access that data is to go through their APIs. But with Payload Cloud, we give you the credentials. It's your database. It's all running on Atlas as well, by the way, behind the scenes.
Yeah, I was going to ask. Yeah.
Yeah, our standard tier provisions a serverless Atlas database, and then our pro tier provisions an M10, and then our enterprise tier goes up from there. So like if you sign up for pro on Payload Cloud, like your life is going to be easier deploying Payload, and you get an M10 Atlas database out of the box. Like it's yours. Go do what you want with it. Like That's a huge difference. It's not like it's more of a deployment platform than a cloud platform in that way. And people don't really get that, I don't think, but
Yeah.
we're going to talk about that more as the future goes.
Yeah. I love the approach to that. Obviously, well, I mean, I work for MongoDB, so I love to see companies leveraging MongoDB in that way. But okay, so I deploy a Payload CMS instance in Payload Cloud. I get an M10 instance. My access to that is via connection string.
Yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
so it's
And
not
then
through
when
the
you
Atlas interface.
No, it's
Yeah.
not.
Okay.
In the future, if we do decide to open up some of that, we'll work closely with Atlas to do that. But we
Yeah.
pass through every configuration option that you would need, and we can build whatever you don't have access to. So, yeah, we give you the connection string, and we inject it as an environment variable into the app that actually runs on Payload Cloud.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So it's all done for you. You don't have to do anything. You
Yeah.
just connect your GitHub repo and then hit deploy, and it's boom, it's live.
Yeah. I love the approach because it's like an easy button, right? I can take the easiest way, the easiest route, and begin to build something very quickly. But if I want to pick it open and customize it, I can do that.
Absolutely. Like I've been struggling with DevOps for the last 7, 8 years, and I don't like it. Like it's not what I want to do. I want to write like really clean functions and really, really nice interfaces. And DevOps has always slowed me down. And I'm trying to make it easier for people to deploy payload to production. That's all it's for.
Yeah. You mentioned stand-ups, the way you kick off your day. Is the team remote?
Well, we do work mostly remote right now, although
Mhm.
8 of us are in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and there's
Okay.
one that's in London, Jess, and then there's one that's in Battle Creek area, Jared. The rest of us are in GR. We do mostly work remote. We have a co-working space that we go into once in a while, but
Hmm.
we have a building under construction actually for our office, and
Oh, wow.
it's gonna be a party house for sure. It's gonna be fun. My goal with that building is to make it more comfortable than your living room, so you want to work there instead of your house. And if you're around the Midwest area in the States, you want to come to our open house. That will be sometime in July of this year, and it's gonna be a big party, so it should be fun.
Awesome. So can I assume you're hiring?
Not right now. We have 10.
Not right now. Okay. Yeah.
Everyone on our team is just killing it, and we're not going to hire until our Series A. So I think we're in a good spot. We've got a lot of runway. When we raise again, we'll start bringing on more engineers and other types of operations people.
Yeah. So the revenue model, obviously, Payload Cloud.
Yep, Payload Cloud, but we also
are there other streams?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've had about I don't know 10 enterprise customers for the last year or so already,
Mhm.
before Payload Cloud was even a thing, and that includes those Fortune 10, Fortune 20 companies that I can't name, but
Yeah.
they pay for support for premium plugins. For example,
Mhm.
single sign-on. You can build your own single sign-on plugin right now,
Mm.
but it's hard and it's not fun. And if you want to
Yeah.
use your company's OAuth 2 provider, you might need to have some specific roles or whatever coming from your identity provider over to Payload. So we support a fleet of premium enterprise extensions that enterprises will pay for to get the most out of Payload. And so that's also a revenue driver for us.
Okay.
And I think the combination of Payload Cloud and these like premium features will be what drives our larger tickets and makes us profitable as a company.
Yeah. Great. Terrific. Well, James, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me. I think, let's see. Well, there's a question coming in. Does Payload have a built-in integration tool for testing?
Yes.
Able.
Yes.
Awesome.
You can use anything you want. Internally inside of the Payload package, we just use Jest, and we have end-to-end testing on Cypress, actually. No, Playwright. We removed Cypress, and we went to Playwright because we have all these different configs that fire off their individual end-to-end tests. But you can take a look at how we do it. The one thing that's cool about Payload that it does ship you is that if you're doing integration tests or similar with Jest or with Cypress or Playwright, you can use a MongoDB memory server in your test mode. And Payload will automatically set it up to use Mongo memory server, which means that you can blast your APIs and you can test the entire stack just with Jest. And that is a really good testing pattern. So we have a blog post about that. You can take a look at it. It documents how to set up your debugger in VS Code, how to set up your testing environment, and everything. Should get you a head start there.
Great. Well, I'll grab those links from you after we shut down the stream, and I'll make sure that those are included in the show notes. If you're listening to the audio only version of this interview, check the show notes. Great. Well, James, anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
I'm good. I'm gonna go write some code.
Right on. Right on. James, thanks so much. It's been a great chat.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for joining.